Hey, Mike, it's Moose and Maggie. Long time no talk. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are y'all doing?
We're
Doing well,
doing
Michael.
great. And so let's start here because I'm just on your website right now, and this is not I don't know if this is a Jets and Giants thing, if this affects them or not, but only 8 NFL teams have 85% of players vaccinated. And I'm curious if the NFL is expecting like what we had last year, which was games being played on every day of the week, the schedule being totally flipped upside down. Are they anticipating if more teams don't reach that 85% threshold that we're going to get a really wonky NFL schedule like we did last year?
I don't think they expect that this year because, frankly, I think as we get closer and closer to week one, the percentage of guys actually vaccinated will go up because they will weed out the guys who aren't. I mean, consider they've got 90 players right now on every roster. And if you get almost 85% or 50%, 60%, whatever the case may be, they'll know who is and isn't vaccinated because the guys who aren't vaccinated will have to wear masks, engage in social distancing. They'll be subject to the rules that applied in 2020. So it's not like you can keep that secret. When it's time to trim the roster to 53, I suspect that teams will, even though they're not allowed to do it, they will err on the side of keeping guys who have been vaccinated. And then we won't have the sudden positive test on a Saturday or a Sunday. The guys who are vaccinated, they're only getting tested once every 2 weeks. You're not going to have to worry about out of the blue, guys aren't available. They have to move the game. They have to do that. So I think that it's an encouraging sign that a fourth of the league is at 85% when the rosters are at 90. And I suspect by the time the rosters are at 53, most of the league, if not all of the league, will be at 85%. And it won't be like last year at all.
Mike, I'm curious, away from that issue, down in Washington, they made the announcement, 48 hours ago, 2022, they'll have a permanent name, a change in logo, everything. Will have no reference to any Native American imagery. Why not just stick with, I mean, I got to be honest with you, I kind of like the vibe of the Washington football team. Why not just stick with that?
Well, wouldn't it be the ultimate irony for the Washington football team if they get to the Super Bowl this year or win the Super Bowl?
Right.
And everyone would want to keep the name at that point, but they already have the wheels in motion for this new name. Look, I think at the heart of this is the reality that when you have a name and a logo, you want it to have federal trademark copyright protection. So you're the only one who can sell it. You're the only one who can profit from it. And they had a setback a few weeks ago with the Washington football team name, and I think they've decided to go with a safer route with a name that will be protected, that they won't have to worry about anyone undermining their rights so they can sell as much gear as possible, even though it will be weird. If they would have a really good season, you're selling to your fans who want to celebrate that season all the stuff for your new name and your new logo.
And Mike, listen, I think you look at that group down in Washington, I think they've got, if Fitzpatrick is good, I think they've got an opportunity to be a really good team this year.
Well, I think the key for Washington is the defense and the front seven particularly. And when you consider that, number one, all the great teams, or let's say most of the great teams are in the AFC right now. In the NFC, it's not nearly as top-heavy. If they come across Tampa Bay again in the postseason and Tom Brady's a year older from last year and he doesn't move as well as he used to and he gets rid of the ball very quickly when he feels the walls caving in, if they can bring heat on him, and we've seen it before, the Giants in a couple of Super Bowls, the heat come up the middle. The Jets got him in the playoffs one time, heat up the middle. You don't give him a chance to set up and throw. That's how you beat Tom Brady. And I think Washington has the defense to do it. The question is, what can they get out of their offense? And Fitzpatrick's the key. Every time I'm convinced he's good, it falls apart for him. He's been more consistent in recent years, and this is his chance. After all these years and all those teams, this could be one of the best teams he's ever played for.
No doubt. And, if we've turned it now locally to the New York Giants, the Washington football team has been really one of the teams they've been able to beat over the last couple of years. But sometimes it's just the Washington football team and not a lot else. And Daniel Jones is going to be the guy who's going to have to deal with that front for Washington. Mike, I'm curious, when you talk to people around the NFL, you look at a case like Daniel Jones, who took a step backwards last year, but there were a lot of reasons you could point to. Had pandemic, new offensive coordinator, new offense, weapons, Saquon Barkley injured. There were a lot of built-in, I don't say excuses, but just reasons, really, why he wasn't able to take a giant step forward. How are people in the NFL looking at last year for young quarterbacks like Jones? Are they throwing it out and saying it doesn't matter? Or are they actually using that as hey, maybe this guy is, there's still a lot of question marks about Jones?
Well, there's a fine line between an excuse and an explanation, and there are many explanations as to why it wasn't what it was supposed to be last year. But this year, there will be no explanations or excuses after they've invested so much in making the offense better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the goal is to have him make the kind of jump that we saw from Josh Allen in Buffalo last year. Now, that would be a dramatic jump, but everyone was stunned by how well Josh Allen played right out of the gates last year and how much the offense revolved around Allen, and they took full advantage of his skills. And for Jones, I don't think his high end is as good as Josh Allen's, but this is the year for him to step up. If he doesn't step up this year, I think they start looking at other options for 2022. And one of the key things for Daniel Jones, he's got to quicken the clock in his head. He's got to recognize that the pressure is upon him, and he better get the ball tucked and secured or it's coming out. That's the one thing that he's got to improve more than anything else if he wants to make it in the NFL. So I think they've done everything they can. So he has no excuses this year. And if he doesn't become what they want him to be, then it's time to say, all right, let's find another rookie. Let's find a veteran. Let's find someone somewhere. There's so many quarterbacks available now. You don't stick with a guy who isn't getting it done for 4 or 5 years.
Mike, what are you hearing about Saquon Barkley week 1 being with the Giants on the field and playing?
It's been really vague. And every time he's asked about it, he is non-committal. He should be back. We got spoiled by guys like Adrian Peterson. Remember, he got a torn ACL on Christmas Eve of 2011, and he was back week 1 of the next season and won the MVP award and almost broke the single-season rushing record. But with Barkley, it has been very vague. It's been very sketchy and unclear. So I don't know. I'm in I'll believe it when I see it mode, and that information has been so carefully guarded. We're just going to have to wait and see what he looks like at camp, how much he plays in the preseason, and then you wait for the week 1 injury reports. And, is he even on the active roster, or do they put him on the physically unable to perform list? I mean, these are all questions that we'll get the answers to, but it's not like the usual case, the case where we just assume, hey, everything went well, everything's fine, guy's ready to go. And it was fairly early in the year when it happened. So there's just kind of a weird sense lingering about this one, and I'm just going to wait and see how it plays out.
Yeah, what we get sometimes is some Instagrams, him on the beach, stuff like that, working out. But, Mike, I think there's got to be an urgency that the team has to feel to get him on the field week 1. And the reason I say that is, obviously, you don't want to jeopardize someone you've invested so much into. But, the Giants have gotten off to horrible starts over the last few years. They can't afford to go 1-7 again without, people like Dave Gettleman would have to be on the hot seat at that point, and others. I think there's a sense of urgency with the Giants to really get off to a hot start, and I think Barkley has to be a big part of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And look, I know it's been 3 years, but second overall pick on a running back, this is a risk you take. If he suffers injuries and he can't play, he can't come close to justifying that investment of that second overall pick when you consider there are so many guys out there that you can get in round 2, round 3, round 4, undrafted, like James Robinson from the Jaguars last year, who had a great season. It's not a position that's conducive to swinging the bat that high in the process because of all the things that can go wrong. And I think a cautionary tale for the Giants and for the rest of the league comes from this reality that you're not getting anything close to what you need out of the guy in whom you invested the second overall pick in the draft.
We're talking to Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk. Mike, over to the Jets. Wilson and Robert Saleh, year 1. For the Jet fan that's excited about what this looks like, what do you think it looks like year 1, moving on from Darnold, moving on from Adam Gase?
Well, I mean, it's an open book, and there's reason for optimism. Joe Douglas has done a good job of building the team from the outside in instead of the inside out. They're trying to improve the line on both sides of the ball. That will be helpful. If Wilson can perform like some think he can, and the BYU film suggests there's a high end of ability there that could give the Jets their first franchise quarterback since Joe Namath. Just a lot of things that still need to move in the right direction. But I think there's reason for real optimism, not just like that phony, hey, everyone's 0-0 and we'll until we start losing games, we may win games. I think there's reason to think the Jets are going to begin to be competitive this year, maybe not be at the top of the division, but definitely be a team that starts to lay the foundation for the future. I mean, the problem with the AFC, I alluded to this earlier, but when you look at the AFC, there are 7-8 teams good enough to get to the Super Bowl that are going to rule that conference this year, and the Jets aren't one of them, and it's going to be very hard to compete with the likes of the Bills, the Patriots, the Ravens, the Browns, the Steelers, the Titans, the Colts, the Chargers, and the Chiefs. They're going to run that conference, and I think everybody else is going to be kind of on the outside looking in.
Yeah, we're talking with Mike Florio, of course, Pro Football Talk. You mentioned about that, and I got more questions about the Jets, but you mentioned about the Bills, and that's a team I grew up rooting for, obviously. And it took me a long time, Mike, to get on the Josh Allen bandwagon, like a really long time. Like I think I was the last person who was holding out because I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing because the jump was so big and steep. And now, obviously, because the timing is what it is, they got to pay him. Lamar Jackson could be up for really huge paydays. What do you think that's going to look like for Josh Allen, and do you think it gets done before the season starts?
Well, there are indications that the Bills may wait until next year, and I think that teams get inclined to take advantage of a guy's good nature. And I think Josh Allen, that bond he has with Buffalo already, when his grandmother died last year, hundreds of thousands of dollars donated by Buffalo Bills fans to the Children's Hospital in her name. They have an entire wing named after his grandmother. I mean, that creates a strong emotional, psychological connection, and he may be fine with the idea of waiting a year, but he's earned his reward. He's put in his 3 years, and I think it would be a mistake for the Bills not to get this thing done now, because if he has another big year, the price is going to go up, and you don't want to do what the Cowboys did with Dak Prescott. That's been my approach when it comes to a quarterback after 3 years of service. The team knows him better than anyone. They know him from practice, from meetings, from games, from his entire existence. You know whether or not this is your guy, and if it's your guy, don't screw around like the Cowboys did. But also don't guess wrong either. You better know your guy. You don't want to have another Jared Goff
or like
where you
the
pay
Eagles.
the guy so much money that you want to dump him, or Carson Wentz where it all falls apart. You better make a good assessment. I think for the Bills, the right assessment is Josh Allen's our guy. So don't play games. They're playing with fire if they wait for a year. And I hope for their sake they'll realize they need to get this done.
Mike, we've gone 15 minutes without talking about Aaron Rodgers. I mean, it's
amazing.
I mean, I think that might be a record. I really do. What is going on? We saw him in over the weekend playing golf. We've seen him playing golf. In that the foursome out in Montana. What about Aaron Rodgers here and the Green Bay Packers? He won't answer the question, Mike. I'll ask you the question. Week 1 for the Green Bay Packers, is Aaron Rodgers under center playing quarterback?
I don't know. And that's an honest answer, not a contrived, calculated Aaron Rodgers just trying to mess with people. Like he said on Sunday, I'll figure things out in a couple of weeks. You pull out your calendar and you look. In 2 weeks,
Training camp.
You're going to figure things out. When are you going? The night before camp, you're going to decide whether or not you're going to commit 5 months to your employer.
Right, he spent no time this offseason thinking about it, Mike.
None whatsoever. I'll figure it out in a couple of weeks. I'll figure it out over the next 2 weeks. I'll figure it out in a couple of weeks. I think he's messing with Mark Murphy more than anyone else. People think Brian Gutekunst is the source of his frustration. I think this goes all the way to the top of the organization, and I think he is trying to troll Mark Murphy at every turn. Murphy's given some of it back to him in recent weeks. And remember this, the day before they all show up for training camp is the annual shareholders meeting at Lambeau Field, and fans have to be antsy. They have to be upset. And Murphy, not Rodgers, is the one who's going to have to deal with those fans. So I think Rodgers knows what he's going to do, and he's deliberately keeping it uncertain. So Murphy has to deal with a crowd that is far less than happy that day, and then we'll find out the next day whether or not Aaron Rodgers shows up. My theory's been that Rodgers is going to go, but deep down Murphy would rather he not go. But we'll see. As Aaron said himself last Tuesday, we'll see.
Right. It's been a lot of posturing, and it feels like it's all just a money play. But listen, get what you can get. Mike Florio is our guest. Just a few more minutes with you, Mike, and really appreciate you carving out some time with us today. My last one for you is about another AFC East team, but that's the Patriots. I mean, they went for broke in free agency. They spent everywhere, very un-Belichick-like, just opening up, just every position. It felt like they were shopping at the top of the market. What kind of turnaround are you expecting from the Patriots after one down year?
Oh, I think they're going to be very good this year because they did have a down year. They were bereft of talent, and it felt like they were 3-13, and they were 7-9. And there were a few games that they could have won. And I know every team can say that. Derek Carr recently said we're a few plays away from winning 12 or 13 games. Yeah, but you didn't, and that's the reality. The Patriots didn't win those close games. You improve the talent dramatically, and you're in a position with Belichick, with Josh McDaniels, with Matt Patricia back in kind of this jack-of-all-trades role where he's really helping them in many ways that they probably will never even tell us he's helping them. You add that talent, you spend that money, and I think they'll be right back in the thick of things. And they're the team that when you get into a single elimination setting, They're wired to not get freaked out. The moment's not too big for them, even though they're going to have a lot of new players if and when they get back to the playoffs. The coaching staff has been there and done that so many times. They become very dangerous if they can get one of those 7 tickets to the postseason. And I really do think a lot of what they did this offseason revolved around the fact that Tom Brady's coming back this year.
Right.
And he's going to be in Foxborough for one last time. And they don't want to get embarrassed by Tom Brady, and they'd surely love to beat him in his last game ever at Gillette Stadium.
That's going to be some scene.
Yeah.
That is going to be some scene. Mike, I'm going to ask you for a comparison, player and coach, right? Ultimately, who do you think is more successful? Carson Wentz in Indianapolis, Urban Meyer in Jacksonville?
I'd say Carson Wentz in Indianapolis because we've seen it from him at the NFL level. We don't know anything that Urban Meyer is going to do as an NFL head coach. We've already seen the $100,000 fine that's been imposed upon him for
Not surprising.
being too aggressive with off-season workouts, treating it like college football. The Chris Doyle debacle, the strength coach that he tried to hire with all of the baggage, and it blew up in his face, and he realized you're not the emperor of the NFL team the way that you were the emperor of the college city. So I think it's going to be better for Wentz. For Wentz, there was no reason to suspect what happened last year. And I don't know whether it was the drafting of Jalen Hurts, the deterioration of the relationship with Doug Peterson, but Wentz was great in 2019. Wentz had no help around him late in the year. They were 5-7. They won 4 in a row and got to the playoffs, and he didn't even get a chance to try to beat the Seahawks because he got concussed early in the game. So Wentz has the body of NFL work. Meyer doesn't. That's an easy one. I think Wentz will turn it around more likely than Meyer will be the next Jimmy Johnson.
Well, and we talked to Tony Khan, the son of Shad Khan. We talked about Urban Meyer, and we found out in that interview, Mike, that the head of the analytics department, this guy named Zach, is in the headset of Urban Meyer during the game, or will be. We thought, well, that's probably going to go over great.
Yeah, that means the headset will not be worn by Urban Meyer during the game. When you see him throw it, it's not because he's upset with a call on the field.
Yeah, it's because of Zach and the analytics department. Well,
Mike, listen, enjoy the rest of the summer before it really gets going here in a couple weeks and training camps get going. All right, Mike?
Great talking to both of you. Look forward to talking again.
You got
absolutely.
it. Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk Live on the Peacock Network.